A&Pers, this is Dr. Jones checking in. This is A&P II Lab 1 Video 3. This is the sensory lab, and we're starting in on the ear and the inner ear structures. So there are three parts of the ear. The external ear is from the eardrum out. So this will include the pinna or auricle, the external acoustic meatus, which is the same term we had when we did these bony structures. The external acoustic meatus is the hole in the temporal bone. And then the external ear ends at the eardrum, which we now call the tympanic membrane. So that'll be this structure right here, tympanic membrane. Okay, so on the other side of the tympanic membrane is the middle ear. And just to get you oriented, this is the petrous part of the temporal bone. So this will be the internal acoustic meatus. And so here's why the internal and external acoustic meatus both don't go through. It's because your inner ear is in between them. But first let's talk about the middle ear. The middle ear is just inside, medial to the tympanic membrane, and this is an air-filled space in here, not a fluid-filled space unless you've got an ear infection or an ear inflammation, and this is the tympanic cavity, and it leads to the auditory tube, also called the pharyngotympanic tube. When I was a kid, this was called the eustachian tube with a capital E, eustachian. Okay, on the other side, on the back, inside of the tympanic membrane are the auditory ossicles. Auditory for hearing, osseous for bone. So these are the auditory ossicles, and there are three of them here. This one that's attached to the tympanic membrane is the malleus. Malleus means hammer, like gold is malleable because you can hammer it. So this is the malleus, and it's, see that little yellow line there? That's a tiny little synovial joint. Isn't that adorable? This little synovial membrane, a little articulate cartilage is in there. It's so cute. And the next bone here is the incus. And then in the body, there's another little tiny little synovial membrane there, a little synovial joint. And then the stapes, which means stirrup. And that does, in fact, look like a stirrup. And I have a tiny little life-size version of those for you to look at. And these are plastic of molds of a real malleus, incus, and stapes. Malleus, incus, and stapes, aren't they just so cute? And so you can see the size there compared to my hand, that those are tiny. Those are the smallest bones in the body. So the one attached to the tympanic membrane is the malleus. The middle one is the incus, and incus means anvil, so like the hammer's hitting the anvil. And then the stirrup one is the stapes. Now the stapes, the base of the stapes, or stapes, sits on the oval window, so you can't quite see it on this model, but we will come back to that. So let me put these back, how they fit. And then we'll find these things on the next model. So this is a bigger version of the internal ear. Let me take the base off. Okay. So from the oval window in, not counting the stapes, that will be your inner ear or internal ear. So here's a bigger version of that same thing, the internal ear. Here's a tiny life-size version with the auditory ossicles. See the tiny little stapes in there? That thing's crazy. So tiny. Okay, so let's start with the oval window, which is right here, and then the round window, which is round, and the oval window is oval shaped. And then the round window is round, so that's why. And then these three semicircular canals we'll learn. And the vestibule is this region right here at the base of the 3 semicircular canals, and the cochlea is the spiral. So the semicircular canals and the vestibule monitor, and when I say monitor, I mean sensory. So these monitor your balance. Your equilibrium is the technical term for balance. And then the cochlea, you know, anybody to get a cochlear implant, and that helps them with their hearing. So the inner ear has 2 functions, 2 special senses, the equilibrium and hearing, which is the technical term for hearing. What other terms do we need to know? Okay, so this inner ear has 2 layers, just exactly like a glow stick, but the opposite. So just exactly the same, but completely different. So in a glow stick, you've got a plastic outer layer with a fluid in it, and then an inner tube inside that's glass with a second fluid inside. So when you break it, when you bend it, you snap the glass tube inside so that the 2 fluids can mix, and then you shake it up, and then it lasts for like 5 minutes. Okay, well, we've got the exact same thing here except the opposite, because the hard layer here is going to be the outer layer. Because this is made of bone, and hence it's bone colored, this is called the bony labyrinth. And so if they point here and ask to name the layer, we're looking for bony labyrinth. So this pink stuff on this model is to show the fluid inside the bony labyrinth, which is called perilymph, peri for around, P-E-R-I. And then this gray membrane inside, all the gray membrane, is the membranous labyrinth. Membranous for adjective form of membrane, membrane being a noun. So this is the membranous labyrinth, and it has a different fluid inside. Inside the gray, which we can't see on here because it's not dissected open, would be the endolymph, and endo means within. Now the endolymph is constantly being made, so it constantly needs to be drained. And this is how it's drained off, the endolymphatic duct. And I do want to point out that every time I say duct, I'm saying D-U-C-T. I am never going to talk about ducts in this class, except to talk about ducks, not ducks. So when I say duck versus duck, you can kind of hear the difference, but once you make it plural, they sound exactly the same. So just be aware, we're always talking about tubes in this class. We're never talking about waterfowl. So D-U-C-T every time. And then on the other models, let me go grab another one with an endolymphatic sac. Just here we go. So here's the endolymphatic duct that ends at the endolymphatic sac. The endolymphatic sac works a lot like our arachnoid granulations did. It drains out the excess fluid from the endolymph into venous circulation, into the veins, and it filters the wastes out and keeps the good stuff in. So the endolymphatic sac. And I picked this one because it's got the good vestibular nerve. I forgot it didn't have an endolymphatic sac though. Okay, so these semicircular canals, when they're on the base and upright, the one that goes straight up is the anterior semicircular canal. And then it makes a Y with the posterior semicircular canal. And the one that's parallel to the ground is the lateral semicircular canal. So the one that goes straight up, anterior semicircular canal, connected with a Y, posterior semicircular canal, and this one that's parallel to the floor, lateral semicircular canal. Each semicircular canal has a swelling, has one swelling, and these are called an ampulla. And each ampulla contains a crista, which will be that bump inside, and that's where the sensory structures for dynamic equilibrium take place, dynamic equilibrium. We'll talk more about that in lecture. And then these are the nerves that take that sensation. And this will be part of the vestibular nerve. And here in the vestibule, you have 2 bumps in the membranous labyrinth. This is the utricle and the saccule. So from the top down, it spells US. This is us. Okay, US, utricle, saccule. And then they each have a sensory structure called a macula, which is inside, you can't see it. And from that, you get these nerves, and altogether that makes the vestibular nerve. And then this nerve off of the cochlea is then the cochlear nerve. So vestibular nerve, cochlear nerve. Okay, let's go back through here and see what terms I skipped. Ampulla, utricle, macula, vestibular nerve. Okay, I think we're good with that page. And then we need the big model. So we will start back up with the big cochlea model on the next video because we're at 10 minutes plus. So this has been Dr. Jones. Thanks as always for tuning in. This is A&P II Lab 1 Video 3. The education must go on. Dr. J out.